Yo, what's going on, guys? It's G Miners here. I recently uploaded the Void and the Solar builds that I used for the day one raid race for Kingsfall, and in those videos I asked if you guys also wanted to see my Stasis endgame build that I also use in day ones, and you guys said yes, so that is exactly what we have today. This is probably my favorite build in all of Destiny, especially since osmiomancy gloves came out, which will be one of the main options we run with. The build definitely has its places where it shines over everything else. Things like Solar with Well or Void with Nova Bomb for some added damage might be more of a fan favorite, but if you end up struggling with survivability and ad clear, nothing comes close to the crowd control that this build offers. Most of the gameplay in this video was from a duo VOG run I was doing over on Twitch. Even with a third of the players you are supposed to have in a raid, having turrets and cold snaps made this feel super easy. We are also going for a duo flawless VOG, so if you guys are interested in that, maybe drop me a follow over on Twitch with the link in the description below. But with all that said, let's take a look at exactly what is in our Stasis subclass. First up, we are on Healing Rift. I really don't see a reason to have Empowering Rift with this build. And then for my grenade, I always run cold snaps. I'm going to be going over osmiomancies, which I mentioned, which will give 2 cold snap charges. So that is going to be one main reason that I choose to run these grenades. But if you opt to run another exotic of those that I mentioned later in the video, then you could definitely change your nade up too if you wanted. After that, we are going to be on the Bleak Watcher aspect. This is going to give us the option to hold in our grenade, to charge it up and convert it into a stasis turret. Having the ability to throw down turrets that can hold off ads on their own is insane, and nothing else in the game does that. This is a staple for most endgame stasis warlock builds, so no reason to not also include it in our build, even if we don't always center around using it. And then on top of that, we are also on Ice Flare Bolts. This is another insane aspect because anytime we shatter a frozen target, it's going to release a trail very similar to the ones that cold snaps make, and then track down and freeze another target. What's broken about this is that cold snaps and these ice flare trails are able to freeze multiple targets in a close vicinity. So very quickly, you can manage to turn 1 trail into 2 and then 2 into 4, and eventually everything gets flash frozen. And this will also end up giving us an added bonus to our osmiomancy gloves as well, which I will cover later. In total, these aspects will give us 4 fragment slots, which is where the build gets even crazier. First up is going to be Whisper of Fissures. This is going to increase both the damage and the area of effect when shattering a stasis crystal, or more importantly for us, frozen enemies. Just if you didn't already know, shattering a frozen target ends up dealing a ton of bonus damage. For trash ads, this will almost always kill, and now we're going to be able to deal even more damage and doing this in a larger AoE. On top of that, if we do have a group of frozen enemies and we manage to shatter 1, everything else should chain shatter. So if we have tankier enemies nearby, they take shatter damage from every single enemy that's near them. Our second fragment is going to be Whisper of Chains. While we are near stasis crystals or, once again, frozen enemies, we're going to gain increased damage resistance. This is going to be 40% damage resist in PvE, which is dumb strong, and it should work at pretty decent ranges. If you combine this with resilience and chest piece mods, you're looking at around 73 to 77% damage resistance, depending on how many of these chest piece mods you're able to get stacking. So as far as using this in endgame content goes, it's pretty hard to die even while face tanking damage. After this is going to be the Fragment Whisper of Torment. Anytime we take damage with this on, we gain grenade energy straight back. So once again, being in endgame content and taking damage constantly means that we are always getting grenade energy on top of our base regen. This is going to be 4% back on each hit with a 1-second cooldown, and if we are critical, this jumps up to almost 17% per hit we take. So when you are about to die, chances are you're going to get your nade back to save your life. Last but not least is going to be Whisper of Durance. This will increase the effects of our slow and freeze on enemies, and for lingering abilities, this gives a 5-second increase in base time. So instead of lasting 25 seconds, our Bleak Watcher turrets now last for 30 seconds. It doesn't seem like that much, but this will definitely add up over multiple grenades to give us more time for regen. And then again, the increased slow and freeze effects are going to come in clutch for crowd control. A super popular fragment that most people use is Whisper of Shards, so I did want to mention why I'm not using this. This gives insane grenade regen, but will pretty much require you to run a headstone weapon. And I have never once seen headstone as a useful primary weapon perk in the endgame, so that would be why I kept it off for my endgame build. Headstone is decent if using it on an LMG, but 9 out of 10 times I'm not running LMGs in endgame content, especially ones with Headstone, so the fragment would overall just hinder the build. When it comes to exotics, as I mentioned, there are a bunch of options. Here are my 4 main ones. Number 1, and easiest to use, is going to be Eye of Another World. This is going to just give base ability regen, which is a 50% increase to everything, so things charge 1.5 times faster. This isn't insane, but for its ease of use, it is super nice for keeping turrets up at all times. After this is going to be Nezarec's Sin. This only works if you use a void weapon to get kills in the build, so something like Unforgiven or Funnel Web would actually end up working great. For our grenade, this is going to be 300% additional regen, so a 4x charge rate while we maintain the buff. Once again, I think this is super easy to use and gives a huge benefit, and this also does increase all other ability recharge rates as well. After this is going to be VERITY'S Brow. This is going to max you out at a 250% increase for regen for a shorter duration than Nezarec's and requires you to get stasis weapon kills. I personally think the only reason to run this is if you are using something like Egger's Scepter. Other stasis primaries available right now are kind of mid in my opinion, and honestly, I would always just go with Nezarec's instead of this, but some people like it. This does also give increased damage to your grenades, but turrets do negligible damage as is, so anyone that says this damage helps is on some of that good-ish. And then lastly, my personal favorite choice is going to be osmiomancy gloves, as I mentioned a bunch already. With these, we get 2 cold snap charges, so right off the rip, if we wanted to, we could throw down 2 turrets. However, if you manage to use these properly, you're also able to get a huge amount of grenade energy back, which can allow you to throw a turret, then 1 regular cold snap grenade, and then keep chaining this process. At base, hitting enemies with a cold snap should give around 15 to 50% energy back, depending on the enemy's rank. This has to be direct hits, which are just the initial hit of the cold snap. You do not have to hit enemies with the nade directly out of the air or anything, but hitting multiple enemies at once lets this regen count multiple times. If you remember me talking about how cold snaps and ice flare bolts can flash freeze multiple enemies, this is exactly where this is going to come into play. Some enemies, in my personal experience, also just fully refund the grenade, and then if you manage to have enough enemies get hit by the initial freeze, then you could potentially get both nades back. On top of this, it seems like if you manage to throw this and shatter enemies quick enough, the ice flare bolts also can give energy back. Don't quote me on this, but it seems like this is what's happening. Overall, I think that these exotics are just super inconsistent, but in a good way, where under a lot of circumstances, we're getting back more energy than is most likely intended. When it comes to mods for the build, the only thing I would say you should run is going to be something like Double Bomber on solar class items. This is just for added energy on rift placements. If you do end up using both nades directly as turrets, then you will want another way to get energy back quickly, and this will also keep every mod slot open. The main reason you want mod slots open is for things like Font of Might and Elemental Time Dilation. One of the biggest reasons to use Stasis is to combine it with Reed's Regret for increased damage against bosses while under power. So this build will still let you do that, and then if you aren't in a boss encounter, mods like Firepower and others can also come in clutch. I think the reason this is one of my favorite builds is because of the crowd control. You can literally have a turret out putting in work for you and then still have the option to flash freeze a large group of adds with 1 nade. Using something to quickly shatter these enemies like Salvator's Salvo or even a wave frame also allows you to kill super tanky enemies near these trash adds too, even while under power because of the shatter effect. Once again, just taking damage gives grenade energy back along with rift placements and using the cold snaps themselves, and we also get increased damage resistance when near frozen enemies. I also didn't really highlight the fact that with Ice Flare Bolts, our freeze ability spread like a plague. This goes from 1 enemy to 2, and then from 2 to 4, as long as adds are grouped, which they almost always are. And then on top of this, the subclass itself is the current best damage option for day 1 raid clears, and we aren't forced to use a weapon to make this build work, so your loadout is completely free to run whatever. Let me know your thoughts on the build, and if you guys would like me to potentially highlight some other builds that my non-Warlock teammates like using. If you enjoy these types of videos, make sure to drop a like and sub down below. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.